Tom was known in his small town as the laziest man around. His neighbors would shake their heads as they watched him saunter around the village, hands in his pockets, with not a care in the world. While others were up at the crack of dawn, tending to their farms or heading off to work, Tom was often found lounging under the big oak tree by the river, staring up at the sky, or napping without a worry. Tom will never amount to anything, people would say, convinced that his laziness would lead him nowhere. He lived alone in a small, run-down cottage at the edge of town, surviving on the bare minimum. He had no steady job and no particular skills, yet somehow, he always managed to get by. But what the townspeople didn't know was that beneath Tom's seemingly lazy exterior, there was a mind that constantly churned with ideas that he couldn't quite put into action because, well, action required effort. And Tom wasn't fond of effort. One hot summer afternoon, as Tom was lying in his favorite spot under the oak tree, something unusual happened. A stranger walked into town, a man dressed in a fine suit, carrying a briefcase. He looked out of place among the simple villagers, who eyed him curiously as he made his way to the town square. The man introduced himself as Mr. Harper, a wealthy businessman from the city, and announced that he was looking to invest in new ventures. The townspeople were intrigued. Mr. Harper explained that he had a large sum of money to invest in anyone who could present him with a clever and profitable idea. The news spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the whole town was abuzz with excitement. People who had never thought of starting a business before were now frantically brainstorming ideas, hoping to catch Mr. Harper's attention and secure his investment. Tom, of course, heard about Mr. Harper's offer while lounging under his tree. But unlike the others, he wasn't interested in running around trying to impress the businessman. It sounded like far too much work. So, he did what he always did. He stayed under his tree, dozing off as the sounds of the bustling town faded into the background. As Tom slept, he dreamed of all the things he would do if he didn't have to work so hard. He imagined himself living in a comfortable house, with all the money he needed, and plenty of time to relax and enjoy life. The idea of such a life made him smile in his sleep. But when Tom woke up, something unexpected happened. Instead of dismissing his dream as just another idle fantasy, he began to think. What if there was a way to make his dream a reality? What if he could come up with an idea so clever that it would require little effort but bring in a lot of money? The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. But Tom knew one thing for sure: whatever idea he came up with, it had to be something that wouldn't demand much work from him. After all, he wasn't about to give up his leisurely lifestyle. Tom spent the next few days thinking about what he could do. He watched the townspeople as they hustled about, each one trying to come up with the best idea to present to Mr. Harper. But none of the ideas he overheard seemed right for him. They all required too much effort, too much time, too much work. Then, one evening, as Tom was sitting on the porch of his cottage, watching the sunset, inspiration struck. He realized that while the townspeople were all focused on traditional businesses, like opening shops or starting farms, no one was thinking about something that could save them time and effort. Tom knew that the villagers were always busy, and many of them complained about not having enough time in the day. They worked hard, from dawn till dusk, and often wished they had more time to relax. That was when Tom came up with his idea, a service that would help people get things done without having to do the work themselves. He called it Tom's Time Savers. The idea was simple. For a small fee, Tom would run errands, deliver messages, or do any other small tasks that people didn't have time for. But here was the clever part: Tom wouldn't do the tasks himself. Instead, he would hire young boys from the village, who were always looking for ways to earn a bit of extra money, to do the work for him. All Tom had to do was coordinate the tasks and take a small cut of the fee for each one. It was perfect. He could earn money without doing much work, and he could still spend most of his day lounging under his tree. Tom knew his idea was a good one, but he also knew that he couldn't be the one to present it to Mr. Harper. The townspeople already thought of him as lazy, and they wouldn't take him seriously. So, he decided to enlist the help of his childhood friend, Jack, who was known for his smooth talking and ability to sell anything. Jack loved the idea and agreed to pitch it to Mr. Harper, pretending it was his own. In return, he promised to give Tom a share of the investment. The next day, Jack presented Tom's Time Savers to Mr. Harper, who was immediately impressed. He saw the potential in the idea and agreed to invest a significant sum of money to help get the business off the ground. With Mr. Harper's investment, Tom's Time Savers quickly became a reality. The villagers, who were initially skeptical, soon realized the value of the service. They were happy to pay a small fee to have someone else handle their errands, and the young boys in the village were thrilled to have steady work. As the business grew, so did Tom's profits. And true to his nature, Tom continued to do what he did best: nothing. He left the day-to-day operations to Jack and the boys, content to collect his share of the earnings and enjoy his leisure time. Before long, Tom's Time Savers became the most popular service in town. People from neighboring villages started using it too, and soon, the business expanded beyond what anyone had imagined. Jack, who was running the show, became one of the most respected men in town, while Tom quietly amassed a small fortune. The townspeople couldn't believe it. The laziest man in town had somehow managed to strike it rich without lifting a finger. They no longer shook their heads at Tom. They marveled at his good fortune and the success of Tom's Time Savers. But Tom knew that luck had little to do with it. It was his ability to think differently, to see an opportunity where others saw only hard work, that had made all the difference. He had found a way to turn his laziness into a strength, using his natural inclination to avoid effort as the foundation for a clever business idea. In the end, Tom's story became a legend in the town, a tale of how a lazy man's luck wasn't really luck at all, but rather the result of a unique perspective and a willingness to think outside the box. Tom continued to live his life in the same easygoing manner, enjoying the fruits of his success without ever breaking a sweat. And as he lounged under the oak tree by the river, watching the world go by, Tom couldn't help but smile. He had proven that sometimes it wasn't about how hard you worked, but how smart you worked that made all the difference. As Tom's fortune grew, so did his reputation. The once dismissive whispers about his laziness transformed into admiration and even envy. People began to see him as a genius who had cracked the code of life, a man who had discovered how to live comfortably without succumbing to the relentless grind that consumed everyone else. Tom's time savers continued to expand, now covering not just errands but also more significant tasks. It became the go-to service for everything from household chores to helping with events. With each new request, Tom's network of young workers grew, and so did his profits. He was able to buy a larger, more comfortable house in the center of town, yet he remained the same easygoing, relaxed man who preferred lounging by the river over the hustle and bustle of daily life. But with success came new challenges. Jack, who had become the face of Tom's Time Savers, started to feel the weight of running an increasingly complex operation. He often found himself working late into the night, organizing schedules, managing employees, and dealing with customers. Jack was good at what he did, but the stress was beginning to take its toll. One evening, as Jack sat at his desk, surrounded by paperwork, he decided to have a frank conversation with Tom. The two friends met under the oak tree, just as they had done countless times before, but this time the mood was different. "Tom, we need to talk," Jack began, his tone serious. "This business has grown bigger than I ever imagined. It's doing well, but it's also becoming overwhelming. I can't keep doing this on my own." Tom listened, his usual laid-back expression unchanged. "What do you need from me, Jack?" he asked calmly. "I need help," Jack said bluntly. "I need you to step up. You're the one who came up with the idea, and you're just as responsible for its success as I am. But I can't carry the weight of this alone anymore." Tom nodded, understanding Jack's frustration. For the first time, he felt a twinge of guilt. He had always known that Jack was doing most of the heavy lifting, but he hadn't realized how much it was affecting him. Tom had always valued his friendship with Jack, and he didn't want to see him burn out because of their business. "I hear you, Jack," Tom said after a moment. "And you're right. I've been too comfortable letting you handle everything. But I don't want to see you suffer because of this. Let's figure out a way to make this work without it taking over our lives." The two men spent the next few hours brainstorming under the oak tree. They discussed ways to delegate more responsibilities to trusted employees, how to streamline operations, and even considered hiring a professional manager to take over the day-to-day tasks. Tom also suggested that they diversify the business, investing in ventures that didn't require constant oversight. It was during this conversation that Tom revealed another idea he had been toying with: a subscription service for Tom's time savers. Instead of charging customers per task, they could pay a monthly fee for unlimited access to the service. This would provide a steady stream of income and reduce the need for constant customer acquisition. Jack was immediately on board, recognizing the potential for this new model to ease the pressure on the business. With renewed energy and a clear plan, Jack and Tom implemented the changes they had discussed. They hired a capable manager to oversee operations, freeing Jack from the daily grind, and launched the subscription service, which was met with enthusiasm from their customers. The business continued to thrive, but now, it did so in a way that allowed both men to enjoy the success they had built. Tom found himself with even more free time than before, but this time, he felt a greater sense of purpose. He wasn't just coasting through life, he was actively shaping it. He began to take a more active role in the business, not in the day-to-day tasks, but in its overall direction. He started exploring new ventures, always looking for opportunities that aligned with his philosophy of working smarter, not harder. As the years passed, Tom's Time Savers became a household name in the region. It was synonymous with efficiency, convenience, and quality service. But what people didn't know was that the real success of the business was not just in its operations, but in the balance it allowed Tom and Jack to maintain in their lives. Tom, once the laziest man in town, had become a symbol of unconventional success. He had built a life that was rich in both leisure and accomplishment, proving that it was possible to achieve great things without sacrificing one's peace of mind. He spent his days doing what he loved, reading, napping, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life, while his business continued to grow, managed by the team he and Jack had carefully put in place. The townspeople, who once viewed Tom with disdain, now looked up to him. He became a source of inspiration, especially for the younger generation, who saw in him a different way of approaching life. Tom would often be asked to give talks at the local school, where he would share his story, not as a tale of luck, but as a lesson in thinking creatively and prioritizing what truly mattered. In his later years, Tom became something of a legend in his town. People would visit the oak tree by the river, now known as Tom's Tree, to hear stories about the man who had built an empire without ever breaking a sweat. But for Tom, it was never about the money or the fame. It was about living life on his terms, and helping others do the same. Tom's legacy lived on long after he was gone, not just in the success of Tom's Time Savers, but in the idea that life didn't have to be a constant struggle. There was value in simplicity, in taking the time to enjoy the world around you, and in finding smart, creative ways to achieve your goals. And so, the story of Tom, the lazy man with the clever mind, became a timeless lesson, a reminder that sometimes the best way to get ahead in life is not by working harder, but by working smarter. And in the end, that's exactly what Tom did. As Tom's life story gradually became a legend, the essence of his journey resonated with many. The tale of the laziest man in town, who had ingeniously crafted a life of comfort and success without succumbing to the pressures of hard labor, stood as a powerful testament to the value of unconventional thinking. Tom's life had not been defined by relentless work or tireless ambition, but by a deep understanding of what truly mattered to him: peace, simplicity, and the freedom to live on his own terms. He had found a way to achieve success without sacrificing his happiness, a balance that so many others struggled to find. The success of Tom's Time Savers continued to thrive, but it was more than just a business. It was a reflection of Tom's philosophy. It showed that with a little creativity and a willingness to think differently, it was possible to design a life that aligned with one's values. Tom had turned what others perceived as a weakness, his aversion to hard work, into his greatest strength. In the end, Tom's story was not just about luck or laziness. It was about the power of living authentically, of being true to oneself, and of finding success in ways that might not be immediately obvious to others. Tom had demonstrated that life didn't have to be a constant struggle, that there was immense value in working smarter, not harder, and that true success was not measured by wealth or accolades, but by the ability to live a life that brought joy and fulfillment. Tom's legacy lived on in the lives of those he had touched, inspiring them to seek their own paths to happiness, to find their own unique ways of navigating the world. And in the quiet moments, as people sat under the shade of Tom's tree, they would remember the man who taught them that sometimes the key to a rich life wasn't in doing more, but in doing less, intentionally, thoughtfully, and with a heart full of contentment.